In this lesson, we're going to conclude with the sample, the universal sample in Unity engine. And we're going to close this template by doing a quick tour, a panoramic view of what it's offering, because I think it's really important to have a general understanding of how the engine works in Unity. So we saw that in the previous video, we have different scenes here that we can explore and we can play with. And we went through the first tutorials, which are really easy. They're just to show you the various scenes. And with the occasion, we always introduce new aspects and new tools, new features of Unity. So by exploring these various scenes, we can basically have showcase of the main features and what we can do with Unity. So we can create more or less realistic scenes. We can add effects, lens effects for the camera, or lighting effects, natural light. And you saw this passage here. You saw that the exposure is kind of adjusting. So this is thanks to volumes, which is also part of the Unity settings that we're going to see in this video lesson right here. So we're gonna go through the tutorials. So nothing too difficult, but we're gonna introduce some advanced topics that then we're gonna explore later on with our scene. So first of all, we need to build the scene. Once the scene is built, we then proceed with these aspects that we are gonna see. And these are again some examples. This is the garden scene, which is a little bit more cartoonish, but it contains also some interesting stuff like particles. So you can see the little leaves flowing in the wind, and then we have kind of a foggy things here in this waterfall, and you can see that it definitely looks cartoonish. So this is intended uh, by the author to make it look like a cartoon, or which could be like, I don't know, Disney or Pixar or whatever, or could be like a cartoon video game, because we can use Unity to do animations, but also interaction. And usually interactions are triggered by something, and most of the times those are like collisions, or when you touch an object. So let's get started with the next tutorial. Let's go here. Quality levels. We already saw a little bit of this in another scene, but also here is explained how we can set up. For example, we can use PC high, PC low, depending on the power of our machine. And also if we open documentation, we can go more in depth with all these information right here. But essentially, if you have a strong computer with a dedicated GPU, use PC high. Otherwise, use PC low if you have like a small laptop. Maybe you do only graphics with that, or maybe it's too old, or any other case scenario. But if you have a strong dedicated graphic card, definitely go with a PCI or the high definition, which is the other scene we explored earlier in another lesson. So we're gonna go through the PCI quality level as is written right here. So again, we can open up the documentation where everything is explained even better. So we have some quality levels that are predefined by Unity that we can use, or we can create a new quality level. Once we create a new quality level, we can choose the type of render, and then the type of settings that we want to insert in that. So you have the name. So if I move this aside, you can see here that these are the quality levels we're using. And by the way, to access here, you go to Edit Project Settings. And in the quality, there you go. So that's the quality section. You have some quality levels ready set up for you. And right now we're using the PC high, as you can see there in the current build target. So current active quality level is going to be PC high. The rendering is the PC high universal render pipeline asset. So that's the render we're using, and that's the one we can configure if we want, and creating new quality levels. So it's a little bit advanced, but again, this is just a tour, an explanation, a draft explanation. So we first define quality level. We select a type of render, and then we have a lot of settings that we need to go through. We can go through, or we cannot. We can just use the presets from Unity, which is something I'm probably gonna do. But if you want to know more, if you want to go more in depth, go in the manual. You'll find all the important information. So define quality level, use the quality level, define the configuration of the current quality level. So the configuration means configuring the rendering quality and settings and features, the textures, the particles, the terrain, the shadows, the assets, the level of details, the meshes, and so on. So you have a lot of stuff you need to go through if you want to customize your settings and create your own custom level of quality. And these are all explanations that you find in the manual. So manual, it's definitely a extreme useful resource if you want to know more and you don't understand something about particles, about terrain, about meshes, or any other term that may be like not familiar for you. So let's go next and let's do a quick example. So here in the tutorials, it's just going to show you some really quick example on how you can affect, for example, in this case, the quality level. And so it's making, is showing us a quick fix that we can do, for example, working with shadows. So if I want to address that specific um, file, I can double click, and if I can find it in the project panel. So this is the current render pipeline asset we are using. And if you right click, you can go in the properties, or you can use the inspector, but let's start with the properties. So right click properties, and here you can look for the section of the rendering, and then in the lining section here, the subsection, we have, for example, the cast shadows features or the shadow resolution. So you can decide if you want to turn on or off the shadows, or just lower down the accuracy of that and the quality. So the more you increase, the better will look, but also heavier. So again, it depends on your computer, depends on your graphic card, depends what's your balance between quality and performance. You can also turn off the shadows, but turning off the shadows will result in a really poor realism in terms of lighting. So to have good lighting, you need shadows, of course. And also there are dynamic effects. So they kind of update and they refresh frame by frame, and then they are baked effect that you can bake directly onto the objects through the light maps. So for example, lighting also, not only shadows can be baked, so or they could be real time and dynamic. So also here we can access this by going into the inspector. So window, general, inspector, and there you go. Now again we have the settings for this PC high universal render pipeline asset. Let's dock this somewhere. So I'm gonna dock it on the left side. And also this is a way you can customize the interface again. We already talked about that. So you can create a custom configuration, for example, because you in this moment you want to work with the render settings. So you want to have the inspector on and other panels on. And there you go. This is cast shadows on, cast shadows off, and other settings again you can do with your custom level perhaps. Now next is going to be the render pipeline asset. And so in the, again, render section of the quality page here again in the asset, we can address other stuff which are like more advanced um, renderers that are inside the main render. So for opaque and transparent objects. So as you can see, this is getting really, really complex. At this moment, I think this is kind of too far. But again, it's kind of giving you an idea of how things work here in Unity. So you have like uh, rendering, and then you can filter, you can deactivate or activate some effects depending on what you need. So you don't need to go through all of this right now. It's just, again, a preview. So you can turn on and off, you can customize all these render settings. And in my opinion, I think the rendering part is kind of the last thing you would do. So there is a lot things to do first, like building the 3D scene, working with the materials, working with the lighting. But it's essential to know that sooner or later you will need to decide. And if you're doing a game, or if you're doing a realistic game, or a cartoonish game, I think it's better to know first. So let's proceed. The next one will be the volumes. Now, volumes are, we can say, blocks or boxes in most cases that will change something in the scene. In this case, they will change the camera. So we can call these environment boxes, or post-process volumes, or I don't know, like coloring volumes, post-production volumes. You can call it however you want. But the bottom line is that you have global volumes that act on the whole scene, and then you have local volumes that act only on one part of the scene. So in the same scene, you can have different situation overriding the standard or default settings that you've done. For example, for the camera. So there are volumes that will affect the way you perceive the scene through the camera. So if I go here in the hierarchy, it's suggesting me to go here, and then I can also search for volumes directly. So if I type volume, I can see here I have outdoor volume, and I have a tent volume. So this is for the tent that is in the scene. And so if I filter those in the hierarchy, I can find them a little bit easier. But these are less visible. But you can see this kind of white box, that's the volume. And we have one that is for everything, and then one just for the tent. And we're gonna see here the example. So it's asking me to go to hierarchy and expand the root lining outdoor. So this is probably a section of assets that is working on the let's say outdoor or external lining. So I'm gonna go here, outdoor, and we have light probes, we have reflection probes, we have outdoor volume. There you go. So if I double click, I can see the volume in its extent. So you can see it's pretty big. It's basically um, surrounding everything, but doesn't matter, because here you can change if you want this to be in a specific position, rotational scale, or if you want this to be global, so it's gonna affect everything. Now here the box collider is the trigger that will trigger something, and in this case it will trigger the volume. So here you can change global, local, and once you change it, you need to fix. So you need to click on the fix button, and now we fix that effect. But what does it change? Well, nothing at the moment, but it's suggesting us to do an experiment and use the saturation. So here in the color adjustments, we can turn on and off some adjustments. For example, the exposure. The exposure is something really important in combination with the lighting to have like enough brightness in the scene. Or the saturation is that it works with the color. So if I go minus 100, I'm going to create a black and white effect. So if I play the scene again, now it's totally different from the scene we play at the beginning of the video. You can see it's black and white thanks to the desaturation, or the decrease of the saturation. Now, next one will be the local volume. So I just put everything back just by going back. And now when I go here in the tent volume, which is a local volume. And now let's again do some changes here in the color adjustments. Let's see, for example, contrast and hue shift, for example, to change the overall hue. And then if we want, we can still work also in combination with the saturation. So I increase the contrast, decrease saturation, apply another color. Let's press play. Now you can see the global volume. It's the same one as the beginning, but if I go inside the tent this time, it will radically change the effect. Look at here. And you can see it's kind of fading in, fading out, and that's another option you have with volumes if you want something, sudden change, or if you want more slight and gradual change. And that's it. That's pretty much it about volume. But this is something, and it's just a preview of what you can do. We're gonna come back and do something more specific later on. So this is just to show you quickly the various tutorials and also how they work. And you can see there is a box collider and it's a trigger. So usually when you want something to happen, you need a trigger, you need a triggering action. Now the triggering action is just our character getting into that box, so colliding in a way with that box and make the change happen. Otherwise it will not happen. This is the basic of interaction. So there is not only animation or animated effects, but also interaction. Interaction is always caused by something. So you interact, you do an action, you get a reaction. Now, next one is baked lining. Baked lining is part of the lining in Unity that will improve the lining and is basically something that it will be fixed on the objects, on the materials, on the light maps. So you don't want to calculate all the lights every frame, but only maybe the main light, which could be the sunlight. All the other lights, they are not real time, they are not dynamic, they will be like baked. So you will do kind of a rendering of those effects and then fix them onto the surfaces through the light maps, and that will help you to make things more realistic but not so much heavier. So again, it's a concept related to quality and performance in your simulation. And you can read, of course, carefully all the explanations here to go more in depth. Now, let's go quick. And we can see here there is another window that is called window rendering lining. So this is only for lining. And here we have a lot of stuff. We have probes, we have environment, we have real-time rendering, light maps, real-time light maps, baked light maps, etc. So here we are using now a mixed lining shadow mask, which is a combination of baked and real-time or baked and dynamic. And it's gonna figure out how to use one or the other, but also you can address this using as you can see here, the distance, so kind of a level of detail mechanism. So you can go here and do some more expert stuff if you want, but right now let's keep it simple. And general lining, again, you can use the GPU light mapper. We already talked about the concept of light map, which is a kind of a text or a map applied to objects that can receive lighting, and then it can bake it, it can fix it onto the surface. And so this is the light mapper settings right here. So you can increase the quality, decrease the quality. You have samples, indirect lighting samples, direct lighting samples, environment samples, and max bounces. All this stuff will increase or decrease the quality of the baked lining, but also it will increase or decrease the rendering time. This is just like doing a rendering in kind of a standard rendering application. So when you click on generate lighting, it's going to start the calculation and it's going to calculate the global illumination, so direct and indirect. Next one will be the sky and the fog. So sky and the fog can be considered as part of lighting because they affect light, and the sky will be also used. You can use it as a background, you can use it for reflections, you can use it for illumination. So here we can find it in the environment tab in the lighting panel. And right now we're using a skybox and a material for the skybox that is called gardens skybox. So we are now in the gardens scene once again, and you can change again the tint, the color. You can modify, edit. You can also switch and use another skybox. If you click, you will find it in the project panel. So you can see this is the asset right there. And if you double click, you can open it, or just click once actually, you can open it in the inspector and you can change it from there. So if I click, and now I have all the lighting panel that it's overlapping, so just gonna move it. And there you go. This is the skybox we're using. So it's we can call this environment map or HDRI. They're also called. They are like spherical texture, spherical maps that will wrap everything into kind of a sphere. So it's going to be like Truman Show, where you have a big dome surrounding everything. And that's the one way you can develop your environment lighting. So we have kind of a natural lighting, which is sun and sky. And then we have also artificial lights. And then we can apply additional effects like the fog, which you can see it can be turned on and off, can be adjusted, you can change also here the intensity, the color, and in this case it's part of the environment, so we will find it in the environment tab under the other settings, fog, and then you have color, the different types, start, end, etc. Now let's move on. Directional light is sunlight, so again it's part of the natural lighting of the scene, and it's the sunlight. It's usually created using a directional light, also in other 3D software like 3ds Max or Cinema 4D and whatever. And we can find it in our scene following this path. So it's in the root, and then it's in the lining, and it's in the outdoor lining. So you can see how everything is well structured and organized here. That's a good example how you should work. And then there we go. That's the main light right there. And that icon represents directional light. Again, we're going to come back in lining, artificial lights, natural lights later on in another lesson. But this is just to give you the overall overview of what we're going to do next. And then we have artificial lights like spotlights that are placed here near the entrance. You can also click directly in the scene and select an asset like this, and we can see also the LOD, level of detail. And when we click, we can access the inspector then and modify the light as any other asset. Probes. Now probes are used in this case for reflection. As you can see, this is now about reflection probes. Reflection probes again are to improve some specific effect, which are reflection that cannot be every time real time or dynamic because they will be too heavy. You cannot use the real time effects in any object at any time. So in the other scenarios, you just apply fake effects like reflections using the probes. There you go. This is the probe right there. It looks like a white circle, and it's kind of difficult to select also. So you can find it directly in the hierarchy. So let me just find it again. So as is suggested, it will be in root lining, tent, and then reflection probe. There you go. Now it's selected, and you can see it looks like a mirror ball, and that will generate reflections for some of the reflective objects that are in that area. So if I turn off the reflection probe, you can see the various pottery there is going to look less shiny, more flat. And also we can bake these reflections directly onto the objects so they are not real time and they will be just less heavy to render in the simulation. So next, and let's not save. Materials. Of course, materials are one of the most important part of your design because you can make more realistic, more cartoonish objects just by changing the type of shaders. And you have also lit and unlit shaders. Now the lit will be more accurate, and the URP, so the Universal Render Pipeline, uses physically based rendering materials, which are the most advanced, the most common at the moment. They are used everywhere in the industry, so they are kind of become a standard for the industry. So Unity also use them, and they are a combination of various textures. So when we say physically based render materials, we are basically saying that we are using specific textures. Now let's find this material. I can also look for the material in the project browser. So I'm gonna search for like the tset underscore, and there you go. We already find it. This is the material right here. So it's the kind of the assembly of all the textures, and these are the singular texture right there. So you can work on each single texture on the overall material, but essentially the material will be a combination of those effects and textures that we can see also here in the inspector. So yeah, we have metallic map, and you can also decrease the metallic look in the scene. And you can use a parameter that goes from 0 to 1, which is going to be like generic, or you can use textures, which will be more specific for the various parts of the object and the material. So these are all the textures that come with this material. And if I click in the preview and then I hit delete, it will delete it. So now it's not using that map anymore, and it's going to be less accurate, less specific. It's going to be more uniform, talking about the metallic effect in this moment. So we have base, metallic, normal, height, occlusion. Now again, also here I can click change the texture, select another texture, or if I want to see the preview, I can also do the control click. So control click to open the preview. You can click the delete key to delete it right away, and then you can maybe reassign another, etc, etc. So now we're going to lose details. We're going to lose occlusion map. It's kind of a baked um, environmental shadow, or like blur shadow that you can bake. So again, to make things less heavier, you will bake the shadows onto the occlusion map. And then we have Lods. So final part, the Lod. Now you can read, take your own time, but essentially the Lod is when you create, for example, 3 different versions of the same object. So one is going to be highly detailed, and then you have the variants that will be less and less accurate, so with less and less details. So when the object is far away, it's going to look really simple with a few details. When it's really close, it's going to look with a lot of details. And that's roughly how level of details work. But we're going to come back onto these topics later on. So this will be all for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe to stay updated. If you want to thank us, please join the channel as a supporter. We finished now with the tutorials on these templates, so we're going to continue with other features in the next lesson. So this will be all. Check our other courses and lessons if you are interested. See you in the next video.